Righto. Kia ora koutou, everyone, and welcome to today's information session. Before we start, a reminder, this workshop is being recorded. Please remember that while this workshop is open to the public, it is for staff to provide guidance to elected members. It is not a forum for debate or decisions. It is also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or bring other matters to the attention of council. If a member of the public does want to do this, have a yarn to staff and they will help you have your say. I've received no apologies for today's session, so I'd just like to welcome the team, which I've got 4 names down here and I know there's only 3 of you there, so I'm not going to say and make a dick of myself. They're here to talk to us about the Central City noise plan change. Morning.
Kia ora, councillors. Thanks for having us here today. I'm Darren Bridget from the City Planning team. To my right, I have Jack Chester from the Urban Regeneration team, and to my left, I have Holly Gardner from the City Planning team. We're here today to update you on the progress on work on the noise issues in the Central City relating to activities and the issues that we've had arising. Think of this as a first of a 2-part series. We'll be coming back to you in May with another information session. Today, I have, as I said, Jack will be here to update you on non-regulatory work that has taken place to date, and Holly will be updating you on the plan change work that's been undertaken so far. Primarily, she'll be talking about next steps and timing. Today, we won't have details of provisions, but we can discuss principles about what the plan change will entail. The next session in May will be the one where we will have details ahead of proposed engagement with the public and stakeholders. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Holly and Jack.
Hi all, so I'm going to give you a quick update on the non-regulatory actions. You'll recall that the last time we came to you, which was about this time last year, we'd been working on things like the noise survey, we'd done a pilot acoustic assessment for Space Academy, and we'd also included some new advisory text within LIMS. The focus of our work over the last year was particularly working on educational material. So our Sounds in the City council web pages, which is, if you went to it, that's what you'd see up there, the top one. They were completed in mid-2024, and they offer a range of advice to residents and businesses. So information about sound levels, noise expectations in the city, and soundproofing is available through the website. And there's also links to external resources which offer specific advice for small music venues dealing with sound issues. We're currently working with the public arts team to provide an update to venues across the city, referencing the web pages and the broader work that council are doing to support a vibrant city and arts sector. And we'll be encouraging these venues to share this information with their communities, which will obviously include artists and the patrons themselves. You just move on, Holly. Thanks. The other piece of work that we're doing this year was really focusing on some identity building. This was focused on the southeast of the central city, particularly on the said ASAF block. So what we've done there is really try and focus on the mixed use identity of the area, and we've publicly reinforced the mix of venues, restaurants, retail and residential that's beginning to live together in this block. And so it's helped efforts to establish the perception of this block as a vibrant mixed-use area, particularly with an established evening economy. So we did this through working with Neat Places to do a range of articles, an aligned social media campaign. And this has had some real positive feedback, both from the businesses and the wider communities. The little inset postcard on the left there was a piece of work that we did ourselves. So it was a little postcard style leaflet that we distributed through businesses in the southeast, which had links to the media campaign that was going on. So in terms of our non-reg actions, these are substantially completed. We've been working on these since 2023, although our work, such as the southeast area plan, will always be considering the noise going forward. So I'll pass over to Holly now, and she's going to talk you through the reg side of things.
Thank you, Jack. So turning to the noise plan change, this slide here is showing a diagram of the statutory process we're required to follow that's set out in Schedule 1 of the Resource Management Act. It looks a bit, well, we work through it as we go. And the key thing there to know is we do have a maximum of 2 years from the date that the plan change is notified through to the plan change becoming operative. At the moment, we're up in the first and second boxes there, working in this Section 32 evaluation phase, analysis of options, and identification of the preferred option. And this is a high-level overview of the timeline we're proposing. The key part to note is at the moment we're in the evidence gathering phase. That will go through until May, where, as Darren said, we'll come back to you with our options and preferred options to seek feedback before we go out for public engagement in June. Following engagement, we'll have some time in July and August to make changes and respond to the feedback we receive before we come back to you in September to seek a acceptance of the options and to notify the plan change. If that gets the go-ahead, then submissions period would be in September and October. And this slide just details the key dates to be aware of. If we can, working through this timeline, we would look to have the hearing in May and would get a decision in June. Key risks with these dates to be aware of are that this timeline is tight and it relies on a tightly focused scope. If the scope were to change, we would need more time to gather and analyse evidence in order to make robust recommendations on the options and any proposed provisions. We may also find, if there is substantial interest in the plan change, that we may need more time to analyse that feedback, which we currently had in July and August. We might need more time to work through that, which would mean we'd need to shift that notification decision. Moving ahead to where we're at so far, so this is just a high-level overview of the issues we've identified. We'll talk a little bit about scope and the options and the initial advice we've had. The key one, which I think we're all aware of around the table, is reverse sensitivity effects. New residents are moving into the central city, which is awesome, but that is then causing tensions to arise in mixed-use areas where we have noisy activities as well. And we've seen a rise in complaints in areas such as St Asaph Street and Manchester Street. Future growth and the ongoing transition of the city is likely to exacerbate those issues, particularly with the higher densities of activity that we've enabled through PC14. And that could impact on the ability for noisy activities to continue operations in the environment where residents tell us they want live music and entertainment activities. That's based on the survey results we had in 2023. We've also seen that noise limits are seen as too restrictive. These are in areas which have developed organically as key nightlife spots in the louder, outside the louder Category 1 and Category 2 areas. And those, because that's not anticipated, the noise insulation requirements aren't reflective of those noisy activities that are in that area. Turning to scope. Key things that are in scope is the central city locations, and this enables us to determine options to efficiently address the issues and amend the district plan provisions relating to the central city if that's what we conclude. And we could then apply those key lessons learned to areas outside the central city. The noise limits and hours for those limits is within scope, and that's a consideration of what is appropriate for quiet and noisier times within the diverse central city environment. We have some areas that are naturally quieter, so we might set lower noise limits for those areas, for example. And reviewing noise insulation requirements as well. Outside scope is noise from other sources such as te kaha and industry. The local alcohol policy, which you've heard from the team on, that is, the matters addressed under that are outside our scope, but we do work quite closely with that team. And changes to existing lawfully established activities. The provisions that we would look at and amend, they cannot require any changes to lawfully established activities, such as existing residential townhouses. We can't ask them to boost their insulation. The plan change overall is not a silver bullet that can resolve all existing noise issues. It can consider the appropriateness of the existing requirements and whether different noise limits or insulation requirements could better support new entertainment and hospitality activities, and residential for that matter. This is just a brief slide which highlights the purpose of the plan change. This is important for the evaluation of options when we come to our Section 32 assessment. Turning to the initial acoustic advice we've received to date. The key point of the plan change is that it needs to be evidence-based. The acoustic advice we've received, this is just the initial advice, and this is still going through further analysis and planning assessment. The central city noise limits we currently have are similar to those we've seen around the country in the areas which anticipate higher noise limits for entertainment and hospitality. It is appropriate to seek to achieve internal noise environments for noise-sensitive activities that align with best practice. For example, the Australia-New Zealand standard seeks to achieve a 35 to 40 decibel for sleeping areas in houses and apartments in inner city areas or entertainment districts, and it's appropriate for us to seek to ensure we achieve that. That's right. So, for example, in a bedroom. The advice has also indicated a recommendation to move away from the precinct approach to a zone-based approach. The reason for that is they've observed that the precincts in some cases tend to follow zone boundaries. A zone-based approach would allow us to create some flexibility for venues to locate organically as they have done to date already. The other thing we just wanted to flag here was we asked the acoustic advisors about the agent of change principle. That principle works on the basis that new activities that move into an area, the onus is on them to insulate accordingly to what's there now. For example, if there's residential development in an area, a noisy activity moves in, the onus is on them to insulate to protect what's already there, or vice versa. If there's noisy activities, residential moves in, they need to insulate to protect those residents. The acoustic advice actually told us that it could be impractical to implement for establishing venues and also for building dwellings. The key reason for that is it's difficult to understand what the existing sound levels are and then to know how much you would need to insulate. So that could be quite problematic. It would also rely on a map which would need to be maintained and kept up to date, which would need to show both where noise sensitive activities are and where those existing businesses are, and that would require very regular maintenance. Looking into the potential options that we're considering, one option is to amend the existing noise precinct boundaries. Another option being to retain existing precincts and or introduce the new precincts, or as just mentioned, shift to a zone-based approach. These options require further analysis and assessment of the costs and benefits involved. This would also be informed by economic advice, particularly on, for example, if we required more insulation, what that cost could be to developers. Looking ahead to next steps, as previously mentioned, we'll take on board the feedback from today and move forward. We'll continue with our Section 32 preparation. As mentioned, we will be coming back in May with details on more information on what the options will be and the preferred option, and we would seek feedback on those from Council and the Community Board. I think that's it. Bit of a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you.
Questions and feedback.
Rightio. Yep, we're getting them thick and fast. Right, we have first Aaron, then Vic, then Tyler.
Yeah, not sure that this is going to solve the problem, but anyway, my issue around us doing all this work and doing it all again and again is that we are not fact-based. It's subjective, and so Christchurch used to have a rule that after a certain time of night, it was like 10 o'clock, you had to be below 80 dB at your boundary or whatever it was. It was a number. And if you had a party, a man turned up with a meter, stood at your gate, and you were either too loud or you weren't. Now someone turns up and goes, oh, yeah, I think that's too loud. That's it. It's like, so it's not fact-based. The cop cannot give out a speeding ticket because he thinks you're going really fast. He has to log your speed with a calibrated meter. Why are we not using that in sound?
I think we do.
We do it some activities,
Yeah, no, well,
but no,
Nick Irvin
it should be
would have been
all or
covered.
none. The cops can't just say, oh, he's going really fast. You just cannot do it.
Could I hear from staff on that, please?
Well, my understanding was they did take noise, and it's often armour guard or contract this, but I'll come back. I'll find out that information.
John.
Oh, great.
John Elps, I'm with Environmental Health Team Principal Noise Advisor. That's actually incorrect, Councillor.
Right.
The Resource Management Act allows for a subjective assessment. There's never been any set noise levels for subjective assessment of noise.
Sorry, which bit's incorrect? So it
The,
is
the,
or
fact
isn't
that, the
subjective?
fact that there was a standard that you're required to take a noise measurement for noise from parties or anything else, that's not the case. The resource management allows for a subjective assessment based on whether the officer considers it's too loud via volume or based all the time of night it's occurring or the reason why the noise is there. There's always been levels in the plans that have to be met. Normally they are applied for things like entertainment venues, industry, that type of thing. Yeah.
So, yeah, but how do you, how do you measure when someone, like one person's noisy is another person's fun? Whereas fast
that's the
is
tightrope.
fast.
That's the tightrope you have to work.
In a city street, 50k is 50k. It doesn't change.
But there are noise levels set for as we've said, within the inner city that should be met, and we can monitor those as required.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we switch to, then would be the question, to measuring with meters so people know definitely whether they are over or under, because venues, it's very hard to mitigate your sound. You might spend a few $1,000s and then suddenly next week's monitor comes out and goes, oh no, you're too loud again.
Can I just check though, because what we just heard was that venues do have standards. It's just that the parties, like at people's homes and stuff, it's more subjective.
So what's the dB rating that we use on venues?
Well, I'm not an enforcement officer, but we just heard that the
Can we
venues
move
do
on from
have-
this? We've
So-
got a
Which
lot
is
of
why they were
questions
able
waiting.
Cool.
The ducks,
So
because it wasn't subjective,
go to
it was
staff. What's the dB rating outside a venue on a street?
So, sorry, Chair, can I just intervene here a little bit to explain a little bit about the way the RMA works for this? We're talking about two different ways of assessing noise. One is you get a rule in the district plan that sets a number, and it says, okay, if the noise is under that number, it's a permitted activity. So that's something the district plan can do. That's something this council has some influence over. There's also another approach to noise that's required by the RMA, and this council can't change that. And that approach to noise required by the RMA is that every person engaged in any activity has to adopt the best practicable option to ensure that noise doesn't become unreasonable. Now, that's the subjective assessment that you're quite rightly highlighting as being problematic, because this plan change can't change that part of the RMA.
So can we,
Thank you.
as part of this, write to the appropriate minister? Just because nothing works better than a hard and fast rule, at least as a starting point. This makes no sense because it's subjective. Subjective is dangerous, and we've had a murder in the city
Thank you.
because of noise complaints.
We've got 8 questions.
It's very serious.
Victoria. Victoria.
Thank you.
I'm interested in the timeline and also the overlapping with Te Kaha, recognising Te Kaha's out of scope because it's an entertainment venue, but acknowledging that it is the largest venue within the city centre limits. Have you got any concern around the public comprehending the distinction and as to why it's excluded? And I'll finish the second part of the question at the same time because it may impact the answer. We've got the stadium coming online in May 26. And so from a council reputation or a PR perspective and a media interest, do we want the public hearings and the associated media potentially impacting the fanfare of our largest venue coming online with an international audience? I'm just really concerned about the optics of that and how we explain it to the public that Te Kaha's outside scope of this piece of work. I've just got trouble joining the dots on all of that.
So noise in the district plan is managed by a number of rules and mapped accordingly. So we manage road noise, we manage noise from Te Kaha, we manage noise from entertainment and hospitality venues. Each of those is in different ways. Insofar as around Te Kaha, there are contours within which noise is anticipated to be above a certain level. And within that contour, it's expected that residential properties are insulated to that standard to avoid disturbance. What we're saying is we're not reviewing the contours that are around Te Kaha as part of this plan change. That's off limits. What we are reviewing is the areas that were defined in the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan as being the appropriate locations for entertainment and hospitality, and looking at where are the appropriate locations into the future of where those activities are most appropriate to locate. And the precincts that were defined in the Christchurch Central Recovery Plan and the pink dashed lines on this map here were at a time, obviously post-earthquake, but very early in the recovery. And the central city's evolved since then, and we need to consider where do we want entertainment and hospitality to occur. We need to think about that in the context that within those pink dashed areas, there's much higher noise limits for those activities to operate. And if they locate outside those areas, then they're going to be more restricted. So we need to think about where do we want those types of activities. But Te Kaha's off the table, not because it's, rather than seeing it as an entertainment facility, it's about the fact that the district plan has already got controls and we don't want to revisit those as part of this process.
Okay, Mark, so that's really technical and we can understand that at this table, but I'm concerned about the PR and the reputation aspect of it for the council from a timing perspective with this piece of work underway when we're trying to launch the venue. And no disrespect to you because you're incredibly knowledgeable in this, but there is that saying out there, explaining is losing. You know, it doesn't take away from the fact that you're absolutely right and it's very technical. But I just question the wisdom around the timing is where I'm at with it.
Okay, Tyler?
Kia ora, guys. Quick question. With the Central City Noise Plan change, etc., did you evaluate any other locations closer to the 4 Avs when recognising these particular locations?
So we have the plan change that we're proposing. As Holly identified, the scope currently is for the central city. We have, I guess there's an issue to discuss in how you approach it. If you identify the central city and I guess where the kind of noise issues have arisen already, that's what we've been focusing on. We have kind of tossed up whether or not, you know, there needs to be kind of consideration beyond the central city, but then it's a case of how you define that in terms of scope. At the moment, the focus is central city. That's not to say that it couldn't be expanded. However, there are implications that come with that, such as timing and and how long the plan change itself takes.
Of course. Okay. Then I guess the last thought I had was particularly around the zoning that you're proposing here. It's mainly around central Riccarton and the north facing side of Riccarton, of which is extremely busy, probably the busiest ward in the city, more than anything else. And that's why I was wondering whether you considered it or not. It's going to be potentially a mixed use and commercial interface along that whole Riccarton Road spine going into the future. And what I'm seeing right now is I'm seeing quite a lot of mixed use and a lot of excessive noise, particularly coming from the crack upwards. I'm wondering if that might be considered going into the future, because for the other plans, for example, Riccarton's always included in any plans around the CBD, which includes development contributions, which we just saw a couple of weeks ago. So I'm wondering if you might want to think about it. It's all good if not. I was just going to throw it out there.
I mean, I guess my answer to that would be, in terms of, I guess there's Riccarton, and then there could be other.
SOMO.
Yeah, exactly. There could be SOMO. There could be places beyond SOMO as well.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't want to necessarily favour one place over the other.
Yeah.
If we did extend the scope, we would have at least I consider we would need to consider. Well,
it does make sense. I know it's a lot of work. So.
Not just focused on one area, basically.
Yeah.
It's quite convenient for us to say Central City at the moment because of how all of these issues have arisen. If we were to go to Riccarton, where would we stop? It's not saying, I'm not saying that's
of course
a question not to address, but we would need to work that out.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah. No worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you lot. I've been dancing this tune with the noise controls and everything for over 30 years, and John and I think some might have been getting up to 40 years. I hate to think that, but you know. But if we look at SOMO, because I know there are some people that really want to get that into mixed use, but can we somehow get these processes in place before we look at changing that area? Because it seems a lot of this that we're doing now, we could have done at the front end if we understood the area better, because the people that have the music venues, they put a lot of money and time and reputation into it, and suddenly one noise complaint can shut them down or restrict them, etc., and change things. And that's totally, I think, totally unfair. And so I think we've got to have a really good look at this. I like the zone approach rather than the precinct, but the precincts are kind of naturally formed by these music groups or these venues. And so I think we've got to almost kind of see from their point of view what we're looking at trying to solve. And we were told around this council table that we couldn't put or ask for more soundproofing in residential developments because that would make them priced out of the market. So to say to us today that that we can actually ask for higher soundproofing in residential in residential homes or apartments, etc. We asked that, and we were told we wouldn't do that because it would take the pricing out of the market. So I'm just wondering, I understand what you're trying to do, and I really like the zoning, etc. But I'm frustrated because it's almost we're going around in circles, and you guys are doing a hell of a lot of work, and it's good work, but it's something that could have been solved if we'd done it, or whether you were listened to or not, I don't know, at the very start. Because a lot of people put money into these venues, and they're not high rollers, but it really does affect people's lives, and I wanted for us to try and get it right before we go into SOMO, which everyone says, oh, it'd be great, it'd be wonderful, but some of those businesses have been there for over 40 years, some been there 60 years, and suddenly without any protection, they could be really stuffed. And they're families and people who have got reputations, etc. So we've got to be careful how we go forward. I'd like perhaps a good workshop about everybody with all those in connected, because we've got John here, but I don't know how many complaints and enforcement, etc. I don't know any of that. So I need to know the whole picture to go forward. And there must be somewhere in the world, whether it's New York or Manhattan or London, that something works. And let's see where it works for everybody. Because you have a music venue and you have 6 residents. 5 of the residents might be there for the vibrance of the inner city and having a ball. Takes one person to complain and it changes the whole thing. So I just have concerns.
Thank you, Timothy. Andre? Good question, Tom.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Just a timeline concern and around timing of the stadium. I mean, if the process isn't complete by the time the stadium is open, I mean, what we're saying is that we're building a stadium to activate the inner city businesses, but the businesses around the stadium, by the time the stadium opens, will not be allowed to do business. So what can be done to bring that final timeline forward to ensure it is completed before the stadium is open? There's an 8-9 month gap between submissions and hearings, for example.
I mean, ultimately, that timeline is dependent on the level of number of submissions we receive. Sure. This is a contentious issue insofar as we've got, putting it simply, 2 sides. There's and we need to work through that, and ultimately the number of submissions will influence the amount of work required, and any hearings panel that receives those submissions will want evidence to justify what we're putting forward. We can't do this without evidence, so we can look at ways to streamline it, but given the interest and given the different views we've already seen to date, I can't make any promises.
Yeah, understood. I guess in putting this together, have you factored in a potential reputational issue around the opening of the stadium and that businesses aren't allowed to do businesses just yet, but we're open for business and we're promoting it to the world? I'm just wondering if that's been factored in, because that to me is a huge reputational issue.
I mean, in terms of businesses being able to operate, we've got the current framework of the precincts, which will allow for louder venues to operate, bars, restaurants.
But I mean, currently there's venues by the stadium that by rights are not allowed to do business because someone can show up and make a noise complaint and they have to quiet down.
If they're complying with the noise limits and are not generating unreasonable noise.
Yeah, but in layman's terms, businesses right now are not allowed to do their business, basically.
We'd need some further evidence of that to consider in the plan change.
Well, there's complaints coming through already, so there's definitely evidence there. But you think you get the general point of what I'm saying. There's noise complaints that businesses are getting issued notices around the stadium right now, and that will be able to continue to happen until the time the stadium is open. That's a huge reputational issue.
You're talking about like ducks and stuff.
No, I'm talking any venue near the stadium. It has not had a noise plan change in place to date. So the issue is now, and the issue will continue right up until the time the stadium opens. So that's what I'm saying. Just on most of the buildings across the road from venues currently are Airbnbs. And I just had a look through the advertisements for them. And it says things like quiet hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., family 4-bedroom retreat. This is the best one, serene retreat.
Oh,
how can we make sure that council's communicating with these Airbnb operators?
Serene is brilliant.
I sort of see it as they're misleading their own potential guests. So how do we give them a bit of a kick up behind and say, would you like to advertise the place properly? Well, you know.
So,
is there something we can do there?
Okay, right, we've got to get going. We're going to run out of time.
Well, this is what's resulting in complaints right now. So if we're going to get through till the middle of next year, this is
Just very briefly on that, the non-regulatory methods that Jack Chester spoke about, whilst it's not been specific to Airbnb, it's about getting notice on limbs of it being a noisier environment and communication about the environment that people are moving into, and there's been a lot of good work in that space. So we can explore comms to Airbnb, but we're in their hands whether they pass it on to their hosts.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Because people are moving into the area, they're staying in Airbnbs, and of course Airbnb guests aren't reading the limb report.
Ali?
Yeah,
thanks for that. I'm just interested in the public engagement component. You put aside a month to do that. Is this going to be regular public engagement, open to the whole city? Are you targeting specific people, age groups? What's the nature of the sort of the feedback that you're trying to get, and from whom?
The current proposal is for full public engagement, so anybody across the city could put forward their feedback. We do have our key stakeholders that we'd want to be talking to, and the statutory partners as well. So definitely across the board. Yeah.
Will you have a component where you can find out or ask the person to say what suburb they live in? You know, because I'm just thinking, you know, if the rest home down the road from me find out about it, and you know, and all sort of put in a conservative estimate of the noise that they want to hear, that might skew things. I mean, will it be sort of like some form of marking of where people live? And
that's usually something the data that we do take, so that would come into it.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thanks.
Right, we've still got 5. So just remember that we're just talking about getting this out for consultation. The team's done a hell of a lot of good work to get it across the line. Yanni.
Thank you. I mean, just following on from the complexity of the situation that we find ourselves in, I was really interested in looking at the New Zealand Defence Force's court case with Selwyn District Council. And I mean, to quote them, they said, a no complaint covenant are effective and low cost measure of mitigating the risk of reverse sensitivity effects arising from development in close proximity to noisy facilities. Have we looked at a no complaints covenant on the new residential that's been built in these zones? Or if not, how are we able to do that? Because it seems like a really sensible way forward that could be a lot more effective.
What I'd say in relation to no complaints covenants is that we have to remember that the RMA itself is about effects management primarily. So even if you were to go down the line of a no complaints covenant, which we will be at least considering as an option to as part of our wider assessment, that the concern always is, does that change the environment in which you're focusing the plan change, i.e. around the music venues? Are you effectively just putting a gagging order on, but actually not addressing the issues that have arisen?
Yeah, I guess I was interested in your agent of change thing. Like, inherently, it seems unfair that someone can know that there's a live music venue right next door, get planning permission to build a whole bunch of mixed-use residential right next door, and then start making complaints when they move in, knowing that there was live music venues, to shut the businesses down. So, yeah, I mean, I don't. Is there something that we could do where people that know that they're buying into an area that's got a propensity for noise have a greater ability before the consent is issued for the residential, so that they're aware of the risk and don't have the ability to shut down those local businesses?
I think certainly in terms of the non-regulatory work that Jack outlined and that Mark was outlining, in terms of information that you might put on the limbs, you're giving that information up front as best you can. In terms of existing uses that are established there, we can't do much about what's there already, but going forwards we are providing the information to try and at least cut some of that off. Part of the problem, for instance, the agent of change principle comes down to knowing what uses are out there already, what particular sound levels are already being emitted, and just how the uses establish themselves in the first place. If it doesn't come to us in the first place, then there's kind of the control that you have is limited.
Right. Are we able to get?
Hang on. We've got 5 minutes left. And I've still got 4 people.
Quick. It's just an information request.
I'd be really keen to let along the answers sometimes.
Just understand, not now, but just to get some information around how was an assessment of mixed use in terms of the ability for mixed use to exist next to these types of venues. And the other thing I'd be really keen to get more information on is the ability to do spot zoning for the individual venues that already exist to be more permissive. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll come back in May when we've got another information session on the plan change with that information.
Me? Oh yeah. So this isn't strictly a planning question, but like, so. But I'm going to ask it. Thank you, Vic. So, like, let's just say we established a fund, right, that enabled venue owners to insulate their venues, right? So, like, how would we work that in with, like, you know, like they might be above a particular noise limit at the time, but if we worked with them and we established a fund where we could help them insulate their venue, I mean, it would require a bit of coordination, but how do we work that into a consultation?
So the ultimately that comes down to funding and money being allocated for it to support installation of venues. The cost of that we'd have to go back and consider what work's been done previously and also by other councils. We have when we first came to you with a paper on noise sound in the central city, there was a scale of low, medium, high costs options, and at the higher end of the spectrum is council funding installation of venues, and if that's a path you want to go down, we could provide further advice on that.
Okay, thank you. Because I just got a follow-up statement really, which is that, yeah, like, I mean, we could go the real hard option and say, here's a limit and everyone has to, or we could try options just to try and bring parties together and get more sort of conciliatory and get parties talking to each other, residents and that sort of stuff. And, you know, it doesn't ever have to be about like just having it.
Thank you. Right, we've got Celeste, James and Sarah, and no more, please. Celeste, please.
I just have a question around the timing. I agree with Andre that it would be good to see something happening as quickly as possible, given this is already having the fact that we've got that reverse sensitivity already happening to some venues that have already led the regeneration of the city. So in terms of the gap between the submissions period and the hearings, is there a reason, is that a scheduling thing, or is there another reason as well?
What isn't shown in the timeline is between submissions and the hearing. We have a section 42A report that we need to prepare, which you might have seen previously with other plan changes. That report requires us to analyse the submissions that we get, and again, like Mark said, depends how many submissions we get and how many points we have to respond to. And we may also need to gather further evidence depending on what submissions say. So that's what's happening during that period. Yeah.
And the other one is just request for information for maybe later on, but I'm not quite sure what the colours mean. And also, like, if we were to overlay existing bars and music venues, where would the clusters be? I mean, I sort of know some of them, but it'd be quite helpful to see if we went for, say, option A or B or C, what those impacts would be for the existing venues, because my priority would be those that already have skin in the game, have committed to the city, many of them back when there was nothing in some of those areas, have opportunities to kind of continue to thrive, given that they've already got significant challenges with people building right next door, for instance.
We've undertaken some mapping previously of the location of venues and relation to the precincts, and can provide that at a future date.
Thank you. And James is all happy. So lastly, Sarah, please.
Two quick things. Agree with Councillor Moore about the need to progress this at relative pace, and for the same reasons that he and Councillor Donovan gave, which is good, not just with Kaha opening, but the general stuff that's happening at the moment and the number of residential dwellings going in. I think messaging, like Councillor Henstock said, is really important, and I think that trying to just really simplify it and just say, Te Kaha has already had its own plan change to enable noise and concerts. That's why it's excluded from this. Because no matter when we did it, if we did it before Te Kaha opens or after, if people are confused, they'll go, oh, but they're going to limit Te Kaha and we've only just opened it, you know. So I think that really, you know, it's had a plan change to enable concerts, to enable games, and so we're leaving that space alone. Yeah. Yeah, but the point was being made about Te Kaha specifically right at the beginning. So that's why that's excluded, is because it's already had its own. But yes, we need to do all those areas around it to enable a vibrant nightlife.
Thank you, everybody. That is a good presentation, very good questions and very good answers. So you can see the rabbit hole that we might be heading down one day. So at least we've got to do it. It's not going to go away. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the public information sessions for today.